What's up, guys? Paladin Cross Rider here, back after I don't even know how many days it's been at this point, but it's been too long. Sadly, work and stuff has just gotten in the way, and life has to take priority over making content sometimes, sadly. But that being said, I have been able to put out a few videos over the past week, and one video in particular kept getting a couple comments, not too many, but a few of you wanted to see the deck profile for my silhouette deck, so I thought I'd give that to you today. So with that being said, let's get started. So to start with the ride deck, we have the grade 0 here. You do have to have this specific grade 0 for this ride deck, and I don't advise playing the generic ride decks that this nation may have, because the grade 1 gets you one of the key pieces here. So when you ride it specifically on Silhouette Man, you get to search your deck for one Machinery's Factory, reveal it, and put it into your hand. And that card just, I'll talk about it more later, but it's one of the key pieces you want to see while playing this deck, because it just allows you to keep having your engine for the rest of the game. The grade 2 here, when it's eroded upon by your grade 3, you go into your drop zone, grab 2 different named armed arms, and you get to call them to rear guard circle. So that is kind of the goal of the deck, is to get 2 armed arms into the drop by the time you get to your grade 3 ride, and then you get to go off from there. So last one being Gigant Arms Silhouette. So his skills are Vanguard Circle only for both. Once per turn at the beginning of the attack step, use Soul Blast 1, choose up to 2 rear guards with armed arms, and arm them to this guy. So when the Vanguard is armed this way, you get to give the power to the Vanguard. So right before you attack, you'll arm it, you'll swing, and then the armed arms are normally 10,000 base power. So this will go up to a base 33k swing, which is pretty cool. So, and then the second skill is Vanguard Circle. At the end of the battle at attack, you choose one of the units attached to this unit and move it to an open rear guard circle as stand. So that is the first way you get your bonus attacks off in this deck. So that accounts for the 4th attack in the turn. For grade 3s, we have 3 Persona Ride targets. Nothing really special here, just more Gigant arms. But one thing this deck does with Persona Ride, your arms are considered units still while they're attached to the Vanguard as arms. So your Persona Ride is going to affect all of those armed cards as well. So like I said, your Vanguard's going to be 33 base, but because you have 3 different units on your Vanguard circle, that Persona Ride for the Vanguard stack is going to be a plus 30,000 power. So one Persona Ride gets your Vanguard up to 63,000, which I find really fun with this deck. Moving on to grade 2s, we have 4 Armed Arms Drill. This is kind of the new Armed Arms, or it is the new Armed Arms. So when it attacks on Vanguard or Rear Guard circle, you put an Armed Arms card into the soul from drop zone, and you perform one of the following depending on what circle it is. If it's Rear Guard circle, it gets 5,000 power until end of that battle. But if it's Vanguard and you have 2 or more attached to the Vanguard, it gets +1 crit until end of that battle. So because Gigant Arm Silhouette here is able to Soul Blast, this card fuels the main resource you need in order to get the main effect off for the Vanguard, and it also allows you to have that bonus damage on the Vanguard circle. But when it's on the side, it gets to be a 15k swing on its own, so you just boost that, and now you're telling your opponent, hey, you gotta guard this with a 15k shield if you don't want to take a damage, which is a pretty nice number to have. Then next we have Armed Arms L. Before I get into the main part about this card and why I run it, its skill is Vanguard Rear Guard. When this unit attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, if you have one with Silhouette in the card name, then you can counterblast 1 and draw a card. So I, unfortunately, in the video showcasing this deck, did not read this card close enough before the video, and I didn't see that your opponent has to be on grade 3 and you have to be attacking into it. So I just went ahead and counterblast draw a card with this card. That's my bad, but I'll say regardless, this card I think is the better of the two common armed arms, because I don't run draw triggers in this deck, and I'll explain that later, but I think the draw is very important with this card. Also, with the skill being a Vanguard and Rearguard skill, just like the Armed Arms drill, you can swing with the Rearguard, counterblast to draw, attach it to the Vanguard, swing with Vanguard, counterblast and draw, and then you can detach this back to the Rearguard standing, and then when it swings, you can counterblast again and draw. A lot of counterblast, but if you're really behind on hand, it's not the worst thing in the world to say, I'm gonna counterblast 3 to draw 3. Because this deck doesn't really operate with too much counterblast, so you can get away with spamming this skill a little more than other decks could for a similar skill. So then the next one is Armed Arms R. This one I think is, out of the three, my least favorite, even though it does have some good utility, which is why I keep it at 3 rather than 2. Vanguard, Rearguard. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Silhouette in its card name, counterblast 1, use one of your opponent's grade 2 or greater Rearguards, retire it, and this unit gets plus 5,000 until end of that battle. So, this is where I made the mistake with the Armed Arms L, because this one says you have to have the grade 3, not your opponent. So that's where the mistake came in. But I also almost made a mistake in that video where I tried to retire a grade 1, but it does specifically say grade 2 or greater. So keep that in mind. If you're not able to retire, you can just counterblast and get the 5,000 power until end of battle. So not too bad of a card, but I like dedicating the counterblast more to drawing in this deck because you do have a lot of pieces you want to see. And then the blitz order of the deck, I play Protection Twincast. If you don't know what this card does, you choose one of your units being attacked and it gets 10,000 until end of that battle. This is a blitz order, so good for defensive purposes, and it's hard to come across 10k shield in this format, so having that's nice. But it also has this card's auto ability can be resolved even if you have resolved a Regali piece during this fight. Drop zone. When your unit is attacked, you remove this card from the drop and choose one of your units being attacked, and it gets plus 5,000 until end of that battle for each grade of that unit. So against grade 3s, it's a 15k shield, so pretty good. Only thing you have to keep in mind is you cannot play this and get the 10,000 shield and then immediately remove it from the game to get the extra bonus shield. You have to play them at separate times during separate battles. So, but regardless, good card. And if you watch the video, I didn't play this, but I always knew it was in my drop because I discarded it for the ride deck, giving up the 10k shield at the beginning. But it was nice to say that later in the game I could have an additional 15,000 shield. Moving on to grade 1s, we have 4 Resourceful Mechanic Winston. I will argue this is probably the best card in the deck. Like, I know it's all focused around Gigant Arm Silhouette and the arms themselves, but this guy, when he came out, I put him in before we got the neck support in the set itself. And this promo it brought the deck up to a point where I'm like, hey, I could take this to locals and like have a good time with this deck. Now feel bad if my opponent hits like a trigger defensively and just shuts me down for the turn. So back row center rear guard. If your opponent has a grade 3 or greater, all of your front row units with arms in the card names get plus 5,000 power. So the armed arms will become 15k while he's in the back row later in the game. And that's just really good because now whenever you boost, all of those units become 23k if they're boosted. And like, that's just a nice number to hit. It means your opponent can hit a trigger and you can keep swinging into them with the arms. So that's nice by itself. For the 2 arms that get 5,000 power, you're now saying to your opponent, hey, you're going to need more than a trigger to guard this attack. So really good, but it doesn't stop there. The second part of his skill is Rear Guard. At the end of the battle, this unit boosted a Vanguard. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, Energy Blast 3, choose a unit attached to your Vanguard and move it to an open rear guard as stand. So, I said, Gigant arms himself, he gets you the 4th attack. This guy's going to give you the 5th attack, so you get to detach both armed arms with this guy and just be able to swing 5 times at your opponent for ridiculous numbers if you go into Persona Ride and get a couple triggers on them. So really, really solid card. And this is the only Energy Blast I put into the deck. I didn't really find a need to play the cyclers that let you Energy Blast or Counter Blast to draw. Even though I am looking for pieces, there are so many things in this deck. If you draw a card, it'll probably be another piece you want. The only thing is, like, with this guy, if you draw multiple, that's bad. But yeah, I think him being the only energy cost in the deck's kind of nice, because in the video, you can kind of tell early on, like, if your attacks are going to be big enough or not by the time you need to detach with this skill, where you can just say, hey, I'm not going to detach right now, I'm going to keep the energy. And if you went second and you're up to 9 and you say that, you go up to 10 next turn, you Persona Ride, you Energy Blast 7, you draw a card. You can also use that Energy Blast 3 during that turn and know that's all the energy you need for the rest of the game, because every turn, get 3 energy back, you're going to use this guy. And yeah, just if it's boosting the Vanguard, that means you only need 3 energy the rest of the game. So really good card. If you don't have this, I highly recommend picking it up if you're going to play this deck. You can try without it, but it's just, honestly, the deck flops without this guy. So then the next grade one is for Repair Robo Runny. This card, when it was revealed and we saw the effect, this is kind of what solidified, like, hey, I want to build this deck up. This looks really fun now, and this just makes the deck a lot more consistent, because you do need a lot of pieces to make this deck work. Got to see your arms pretty early in the game in order to start going off, and this guy lets you see the pieces. So earlier I said you don't need the cyclers either. This guy kind of contributes to why I believe that. So when placed on rear guard, Soul Blast 1, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 cards each with armed arms in their different card names from among them, reveal them, and choose one of the revealed cards, put it to hand and discard the rest and shuffle the deck. So top 7 search is pretty good, and with 11 arms in the deck, seeing 2 isn't unreasonable. You're really just searching for one. The second one, if it comes up, cool, you get to thin another card out of deck if you need to, which deck thinning, deck winning, we've probably all heard that term 1,000 times by now, but it sticks true. Like, you do enjoy deck thinning in this game and just compression for triggers. But his second skill is Rear Guard. When your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Silhouette in the card name attacks, Soul Blast 1 and retire this unit. Until end of that battle, when your opponent would call cards from hand to card circle, they must call 2 or more at the same time. So now we're making our Vanguard big, to the point your opponent's probably going to have to perfect guard, because the drill put a crit on it, so that makes it threatening. And with the Prank Gate over trigger, we know that that number is going to be just awful if it hits. So this just says, hey, you can no longer perfect guard this attack. You now have to perfect guard, but you're still going to throw out 1 additional card. So just telling your opponent, hey, 3 cards to guard, or if they only have 2 cards in hand and 1's a perfect guard, you now need to throw down that second card, and then when you call 2 more units, they can swing in. Just gonna wrap up the game that way. Like, the guard restrict kind of blew this out of the water for me. Like, I really love this card, and if we didn't have the drill with the effect that it has, I wouldn't even consider this card, because the Soul Blast would be awful using it for 2 skills. But because of the drill, it just lets this guy use his skills properly, and lets just our Gigant arm silhouette work with this. Like, you have soul for days now, and like this card, another 10 out of 10. I wouldn't, you could probably cut it to 3. I wouldn't advise it just because the guard restrict, it's that powerful. Next grade 1 is Bustling Mechanic Rodney. His skill is if you have a Vanguard attached this turn, this unit gets 10,000 power. So the wording on that's kind of weird. I'm not 100% sure, but the way it sounds to me is because it said attached with a past tense, the moment you attach a card, it gets 10,000 power. I kind of messed up in the video, I believe, with this skill too. I think I gave the 10,000 early, which was my bad once again, but still, deck was showcased enough where it didn't matter. So, but yes, once you attach a card, it gets 10,000 power. Also in the back row, at the end of the battle, your Vanguard with Silhouette in its card name attacked a grade 3 or greater Vanguard. If your front row has no rear guards, you Soul Blast, stand this unit. So, another card that eats soul, and I wasn't a huge fan before the drill came out with this guy either, but now that we have the drill and we can soul charge a lot of cards, this guy became a lot better. I would say out of all the skills, I'd probably put him as the one you probably prioritize the least for the Soul Blast. The first thing you want to prioritize is Gigant Arms here. He's your Vanguard, you want to go off with him every turn. Then I would say prioritize running next, and if you have the soul available, then go for Rodney. But that's kind of, once you get used to the deck, you have to know when to commit that soul, because eating up 3 to 4 soul every single turn is a lot. So just know what you're soul blasting for. But having this guy be a, what is that, 18k booster on any of the arms is going to make their numbers quite ridiculous. So next up is 4 Perfect Guard. Not much to say here. I did not put Elementaria in here. Highly recommend that if you have it. Not a big deal if you don't. Some guard restrict decks do stink, but hey, if you got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. You can still play the game without it though. Then the last grade 1 for the deck is Machinery's Factory. So this is, I would say, another key piece of the deck that you have to run 4. I can't even imagine cutting it down to 3 in all honesty. I tried it, and the card is just an absolute necessity. Like, even though you're searching one out with the ride line, it helps to sit on at least 2. If you see more than that, cool. But the skills are Order Zone, rest of this card, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 card with Armed Arms and the card name from among them, and reveal it. Put it into your hand if your drop has a card with the same card name, and discard it if your drop does not. If you put a card into your hand, put this card into Soul and shuffle the deck. So one thing I do is you want to see the Armed Arms in drop because you're able to recycle them with so many effects. So once I get this, I'll play it, I'll rest it, I'll go for that armed and discard it. But the next turn I'll rest it again, and I'm looking for a different arm. If I see the same arm, I'm not going to put that into my hand because I don't want this card going into Soul, because the second effect is, while it's in the Order Zone, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Silhouette in its card name, put this card into Soul, choose up to 2 cards with Armed Arms and different card names from your drop, and call them to open rear guard. So the grade 2 in the ride line lets you call your first 2 Armed Arms for free, and after that you're relying on this card to go to Soul in order to fetch them back. It does fuel Soul, which is nice, but that's also why I don't use the first skill, because I don't want this card going to Soul, because I know this is how I have to fetch back the grade 2s the rest of the game. If I use that skill and get one to hand, and this goes to Soul, then I have to be sure that I have to keep that Armed Arms and another Armed Arms in hand in order to call it down if I don't have any more of these in the order zone. If I see like 3 or 4, maybe I'll consider it just to have that little bit of guard power, but typically I just keep moving these to soul in order to recycle. Finally, moving on to triggers. My least favorite over trigger in the game. I don't like this, but I understand it's too good. You have to run it. I think this card is busted, and this deck gets to take advantage of its effect. So if you don't know what Elder Breath does, first of all, congrats for never having your opponent play it on you. Second of all, its additional effect is double the power and crit of all your front row units until end of turn. So just, yeah, if you do boost a unit, there has been a ruling with this where it's only doubling the power of the front row, not the power from the back row. So if like you have a 10,000 front row and an 8k back row, and you swing for 8, or it turns the column into 18, you're gonna just double that front row to a 20k, so it's gonna become 28k, not 36,000. So just keep that in mind when you're doubling power, that it's only gonna be the front row and not with the boosted power on the Vanguard. So, but yeah, so the way triggers work in this deck, specifically ones that affect multiple cards, is all of the arms will be able to have trigger values assigned to them. So if you hit this and you are in the arm state, your armed arms are also going to double power. You can also assign the 100 million to one of the arms, which will then detach, and then you're able to have a 200 million rear guard as well, with at least 2 critical. So yeah, the triggers are kind of silly in this deck for that reason. And yeah, Elder Breath, run that. If you don't have it, you can go for something else, but if you do, just run it, because it's an instant win button. Then for crits, we have 2 and 3, so set that in the reverse order. But 2 and 3, you don't really need the move to soul. I just didn't have another deck that needed those right now, so I threw them in here. But you can just run the 5k ones, and if you need that as a booster, like if your opponent's retiring back row with their deck, just having the 5k boost is helpful on the Vanguard. Not much to say, but you can see that I don't run 8 crit in this deck, and that's because I just enjoy this a little more. I run in total 6 front triggers. So yeah, when you hit a front trigger, like I said, you can assign the power of a trigger to one of the armed units. So if you hit a crit, you can give it to an armed unit as well as the critical, and then when you call it, it'll have the trigger value on the rear guard circle. The front triggers, you hit them and your Vanguard's going to be plus 30,000 power, which is just really good when you think that a Persona ride got you to 63. One of these is going to just send you to 93,000, and one more trigger can get you over that 100,000 threshold. That's a little scary to think about, but it doesn't happen too often. And with the armed arms drill, I think you can just afford to cut back on the crits enough and say, you know what, you have to perfect guard this every turn, or the Vanguard's just going to deal 2 damage to you. So 6 fronts, really fun. Give that a shot if you haven't. And then finally, I have the 4 heal in the deck. So I have 1 effect, heal, but you can kind of run whatever you want. I know some people like the 15k shield more just for the early game rush meta we're kind of in right now. Definitely you can go for that, but if you like the effect ones, they're not bad either. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Glad to be back in making videos, I'll say. Kind of at a point now we have to record some soon, so hopefully this weekend we'll get to that. But if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. You can follow me over on Twitter, but I'm really trying to get off that platform now just because of some of the changes they've been making lately. So trying Blue Sky out, seeing how that's going to go for a little while. But you can follow me on both of those if you want to. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. I will catch you in the next video.